September 11, 2001. A peaceful morning suddenly turned into chaos. Passenger airplanes became weapons. Smoke filled the sky. Fear spread across the world. 2 planes struck the towers of the World Trade Center. Within hours, the buildings collapsed. Thousands of people lost their lives. The attacks shocked humanity. But behind this tragedy stood a man hiding far away, in caves, mountains, and secret compounds. His name was Osama bin Laden. To some, he was a hero. To many others, he was the face of global terror.
Osama was more religious than the rest of us. He did not like to listen to music or to watch TV.
But how does a wealthy young man become the leader of a violent global movement? What shaped his beliefs? And how did his actions change the modern world forever? This is his full story. Osama bin Laden was born on March 10, 1957, in Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia. His childhood was not marked by hardship. Instead, he was born into extraordinary wealth. His father, Mohammed bin Laden, was one of the richest construction magnates in the Middle East. His company built highways, mosques, and royal palaces. He had close ties to the Saudi royal family. The bin Laden family lived in luxury, huge houses, expensive cars, and endless resources. Yet Osama lived differently. From a young age, he showed little interest in wealth. He preferred religion, discipline, and simplicity. Teachers described him as quiet, polite, and serious. He was one of more than 50 children, raised in a large and complex family. His upbringing emphasized strict religious education and loyalty to Islamic traditions. Osama studied business and economics at university. But more important than his academic studies were the religious ideas that influenced him. During the 1960s and 1970s, the Middle East was going through major political changes. Many thinkers preached that Muslim societies had become weak because they had moved away from religious principles. Osama absorbed these messages deeply. He believed society must return to strict religious values. He also began to see global politics as a struggle between Islamic identity and Western influence. These beliefs slowly shaped his worldview. To understand Osama's rise, we must understand the global situation at the time. The world was divided between 2 superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. This period was known as the Cold War. Both sides competed for influence across the world. In 1979, one event changed everything. The Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. For many Muslims, this invasion was seen as an attack on their land and faith. At just 22 years old, Osama traveled to Afghanistan. At first, he was not a soldier. He was a supporter and organizer. He used his wealth to build roads, hospitals, and training facilities for fighters resisting Soviet forces.
You have declared a jihad against the United States. Can you tell us why?
The U.S. government has committed acts that are extremely unjust, hideous, and criminal through its support of the Israeli occupation of Palestine. And we believe the U.S. is directly responsible for those killed in Palestine, Lebanon, and Iraq. Due to its subordination to the Jews, the arrogance of the United States regime has reached the point that they occupied Arabia, the holiest place of the Muslims, who are more than 1 billion people in the world today.
He also helped recruit volunteers from across the Arab world. During this period, he developed leadership skills, built international connections, and gained influence among fighters. The Afghan War became a turning point in his life. Interestingly, the Afghan resistance received support from the Central Intelligence Agency, which wanted to weaken the Soviet Union. Weapons, training, and money flowed into the region. This complex alliance created unintended consequences. The war trained thousands of fighters and built global militant networks. Osama later believed this war proved that faith could defeat a superpower. This belief shaped everything he did afterward. By 1989, Soviet forces withdrew from Afghanistan. To many fighters, this was a historic victory. Osama returned home with prestige and influence. But he was no longer just a wealthy young man. He now saw himself as part of a global mission. In the late 1980s, Osama founded al-qaeda. The name means the base. It was designed as a network of trained fighters who could operate across countries. Its goal was to wage violent struggle in defense of Osama's vision of Islam. This organization would later become one of the most feared terrorist groups in history.
A series of things. Number one was destroy the Taliban because they wouldn't surrender bin Laden. Number two was to destroy al-Qaeda as an organization. And then, of course, finally, eliminate bin Laden. We would initially land and position ourselves in the Panjshir, coordinate with the Northern Alliance from there, and, of course...
In 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait. The Saudi government allowed American troops to enter Saudi Arabia for protection. Osama strongly opposed this decision. He believed non-Muslim troops should never be stationed in the land of Islam's holy sites. His criticism angered Saudi authorities. Eventually, his citizenship was revoked. He became an exile. Osama moved to Sudan in the early 1990s. There, he built businesses, training camps, and financial networks. He expanded his influence and strengthened his organization. During this time, his ideology became more extreme. He began to openly call for attacks against Western targets. International pressure forced Sudan to expel him in 1996. Osama returned to Afghanistan, where he found protection under the Taliban from remote mountain bases. He built training camps for fighters from around the world. These camps taught weapons training, survival skills, and ideological teachings. Afghanistan became the center of his global operations. Osama publicly declared war on the United States. He accused America of controlling Middle Eastern politics, supporting Israel, and exploiting Muslim lands.
This and other acts of aggression and injustice, we have declared jihad against the U.S.
Is the jihad directed against the U.S. government or United States?
His statements call for attacks on American civilians and military targets. From 1980 onward, the conflict in which Osama bin Laden became involved unfolded in a manner similar to many Afghan wars over the previous 2 centuries. By the end of 1980, the Soviet Union had deployed approximately 80,000 troops, and with their vastly superior military equipment, they succeeded in occupying and maintaining control over the major urban centers, while supporting the Marxist government of the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan. However, the Mujahideen factions, comprising both moderate and more fundamentalist elements, largely dominated the countryside beyond the cities. The rugged terrain of the Hindu Kush, which spans much of Afghanistan, particularly in the eastern and northern regions, provided ideal conditions for guerrilla warfare, and this became a defining feature of the Soviet-Afghan conflict during the 1980s. The war grew increasingly brutal, as Soviet forces relied on widespread bombing campaigns and the destruction of rural settlements in an attempt to eliminate insurgent fighters. By the middle of the decade, more than 4 million people, out of a national population of roughly 14 million, had been displaced. Hundreds of thousands fled as refugees to Pakistan and Iran, while the conflict caused at least 500,000 deaths, and possibly up to 3 times that number. Over time, the war came to be viewed as a Soviet counterpart to the Vietnam War for the United States, as Soviet forces found themselves confronting an adversary they were unable to decisively defeat. During this period, bin Laden emerged as a significant participant in the Mujahideen movement in Afghanistan. Initially, he focused on supplying material resources to fighters and facilitating the travel of volunteers from his homeland of Saudi Arabia to Pakistan, where they received training and equipment before being sent into Afghanistan. Throughout these years, he frequently moved between Pakistan and Mujahideen bases located in the mountainous regions of the Hindu Kush. In 1984, together with his mentor Abdul Azam, he founded Maktab al-Khidmat, an organization designed to raise financial support from both the Arab world and Western countries to sustain the war effort against the Soviets. The funds collected were used to acquire weapons and provide training for Mujahideen fighters. By 1986, the organization had trained hundreds of combatants who were stationed in eastern Afghanistan at bin Laden's base, known as Al-Masada or the Lion's Den. These forces played a leading role in Mujahideen operations against Soviet troops and the Marxist government during the Battle of Jaji in the late spring and early summer of 1987. Although the battle held limited strategic importance within the broader conflict, it significantly enhanced bin Laden's standing among the Mujahideen and across the wider Arab world. This recognition was partly due to coverage of the battle by the emerging Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi, who was associated with bin Laden at the time, though he maintained markedly different political and religious views. The creation of Maktab al-Qidmat proved highly consequential during the 1980s, as it established the foundations for the broader jihadist movement that later became closely associated with bin Laden. As the Soviet war effort and the Marxist regime they supported moved steadily toward defeat in the late 1980s, attention shifted to the organization's future direction. Some members favored maintaining it as a relatively moderate body that would continue its activities against the Soviets. However, bin Laden, Osama, and their supporters opposed this approach, advocating instead for the transformation of Maktab al-Qidmat into a more expansive organization dedicated to expelling non-Arab powers from the Arab and Muslim world. Ultimately, this more radical faction prevailed, leading bin Laden and Osama to establish a new organization in 1988 called al-Qaeda, meaning the base or the foundation. Over time, it developed into the largest jihadist network in the world and gained global notoriety. From its inception, al-Qaeda aimed to wage a holy war or jihad against non-Muslims throughout regions traditionally associated with the Muslim world, including the Middle East, Lower Central Asia, the Maghreb in North Africa, and more peripheral areas such as Somalia, Mali, and Nigeria in sub-Saharan Africa, as well as Muslim-populated regions farther east, including Indonesia and other locations. A central element of its ideological outlook involved eliminating American influence in the region and destroying the State of Israel, which it regarded as a Western outpost in the Levant. As time passed, the group concluded that provoking a large-scale conflict with the United States would be necessary to radicalize the Muslim world against what referred to as kafir, or non-believers. Since the organization lacked the capacity to engage in open warfare in its early years, it adopted terrorist methods as its primary strategy. Furthermore, al-Qaeda regarded moderate Muslims as having strayed from what it considered authentic Islamic practice and sought to impose a strict system of governance throughout the Muslim world based on Sharia law and a literal interpretation of the Quran. By the time al-Qaeda was founded in 1988, the conflict in Afghanistan was already approaching its conclusion. After assuming leadership of the Soviet Union in 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev publicly declared his intention to end Soviet military involvement in the country. However, just as the United States had required several years to fully withdraw from the Vietnam War, the Soviet Union could not disengage immediately. In fact, in the short term, Moscow significantly increased the number of troops stationed in Afghanistan in an effort to secure a swift victory through a large-scale troop surge. This strategy ultimately failed, largely because the administration of Ronald Reagan continued supplying the Mujahideen with substantial military and financial support. Once the insurgents were equipped with Stinger missiles capable of shooting down Soviet helicopters, their guerrilla campaign entered an exceptionally successful phase. Eventually, peace agreements were signed in 1988 between the Afghan government, the Soviet Union, the United States, and Pakistan, and by 1989 the final Soviet troops had withdrawn from Afghanistan. In the years that followed, the Marxist government steadily lost territory to various Mujahideen factions and ultimately collapsed in 1992. However, the removal of the communist regime did not bring stability. Instead, rival Mujahideen groups quickly began fighting among themselves. This internal conflict led to 4 years of civil war, culminating in 1996 with the emergence of Taliban as the dominant force. Even then, the Taliban never achieved complete control over Afghanistan, as much of the northern region remained under the authority of the Northern Alliance throughout the late 1990s and early 2000s. In the aftermath of the Soviet-Afghan War, Osama bin Laden returned to his homeland of Saudi Arabia in 1989. He was welcomed as a hero for his involvement in the effort to expel Soviet forces from Afghanistan. Back in the Arabian Peninsula, he began working with the Saudi bin Laden Group, his family's construction and business enterprise, seeking to use its economic strength and commercial connections to expand al-Qaeda's reach. At the same time, he developed relationships with prominent figures in the Islamic jihadist movement in Egypt and elsewhere. During this period, tensions between bin Laden and the Saudi government steadily intensified. While bin Laden pursued an increasingly aggressive stance toward non-Muslims, the Saudi leadership continued strengthening its alliance with the United States in the Middle East. One early source of disagreement concerned the South Yemen civil war. Bin Laden advocated direct Saudi intervention to remove the Soviet-backed Yemeni Socialist Party, but the Saudi monarchy in Riyadh prevented him from pursuing this objective. Another regional crisis soon deepened the divide between bin Laden and the Saudi authorities, ultimately leading to a complete rupture in his relationship with the Saudi royal family. On August 2, 1990, Saddam Hussein, the ruler of Iraq, who had spent much of the 1980s engaged in war with Iran with substantial support from the United States, launched an invasion of Kuwait. Kuwait, one of the wealthiest nations per capita in the world, was also a country to which Iraq owed billions of dollars, funds it had borrowed to finance its conflict with Iran. The invasion, which saw the small Gulf state conquered in just 2 days, provoked widespread international condemnation. Within weeks, the United States began assembling a multinational military coalition to mount a counteroffensive against Iraq. This alliance included Britain, France, Germany, and numerous other nations, and also received support from several Arab and Muslim countries, including Egypt, Syria, and Saudi Arabia. By the autumn of 1990, while diplomatic efforts to reach a peaceful resolution were still underway, American forces began deploying to the Middle East as part of a military buildup. Most of these troops were stationed in Saudi Arabia, which would serve as the operational base for the planned liberation of Kuwait and a potential assault on Iraq should negotiations fail. When diplomatic efforts collapsed, the United States launched Operation Desert Storm on January 16, 1991. Bin Laden strongly opposed a military buildup from the outset, particularly after the Saudi government accepted a proposal by U.S. Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney for American intervention to prevent Iraqi expansion into Saudi territory. In response, bin Laden arranged a meeting with Saudi ruler King Fahd, urging him to reject the presence of American forces in Saudi Arabia. He offered instead to deploy his own Arab Legion, composed of fighters who had served in Afghanistan, to defend the kingdom's borders against any Iraqi attack. His proposal was rejected, and the deployment of U.S. and coalition forces continued to escalate. As the military presence grew, bin Laden publicly criticized the Saudi government, launching a hostile propaganda campaign in which he accused the royal family of inviting Western non-believers into a land that safeguarded Islam's holiest cities, Mecca and Medina. He also sought to persuade the ulama, Saudi Arabia's leading religious scholars, to issue a fatwa condemning the American presence on the Arabian Peninsula. These actions led to an irreversible breakdown in relations between bin Laden and the Saudi authorities, and in 1991 he was expelled from the country. Meanwhile, Operation Desert Storm resulted in the rapid defeat of Iraqi forces and the liberation of Kuwait in the spring of 1991. Rather than pursue the overthrow of Saddam Hussein's government, the United States allowed him to remain in power, withdrew most of its troops from the region, and imposed severe economic sanctions on Iraq. After his expulsion from Saudi Arabia in 1991, bin Laden relocated to Sudan, settling there the following year. In 1989, Omar al-Bashir had seized power through a largely bloodless military coup and soon implemented a strict interpretation of Sharia law throughout the country, making Sudan a suitable refuge for bin Laden's activities. He had been personally invited by Hassan al-Turabi, the Speaker of Sudan's National Assembly and the second most powerful figure in the country after al-Bashir. In Sudan, bin Laden established himself within a heavily fortified compound guarded by al-Qaeda followers equipped with advanced weaponry. New Mujahideen training camps were created near the capital, Khartoum, and he also maintained a residence in the city. Due to the freedom he was granted there, Sudan was eventually designated a state sponsor of international terrorism. Following the Gulf War, bin Laden and al-Qaeda attracted increasing scrutiny from American intelligence agencies and the U.S. State Department. Between 1992 and 1996, while bin Laden resided in Sudan, U.S. authorities monitored his activities closely, conducting regular surveillance flights over his compound and gathering intelligence on a near-daily basis. By 1996, U.S. sanctions imposed on Sudan for harboring bin Laden and other prominent Islamic militants had severely damaged the country's economy. At the same time, President al-Bashir had sidelined bin Laden's principal ally within the Sudanese government, Hassan al-Turabi. As a result, it became clear to bin Laden that Sudan could no longer serve as a secure refuge, and he was forced to leave. That same year, he returned to Afghanistan, where the Taliban had recently consolidated control over much of the country. There, he became a guest of Mullah Muhammad Omar, the Taliban's founding leader after its rise to power. In August 1996, bin Laden issued a formal declaration of war against the United States through various Islamic media outlets. He argued that the United States had effectively occupied Saudi Arabia through its military presence since 1990 and accused it of being Israel's principal supporter in the Middle East. Some analysts have suggested that bin Laden's increasingly radical stance in 1996 was partly driven by the loss of much of his personal wealth after leaving Sudan. His expulsion and the pressures created by U.S. sanctions against Sudan may have further intensified his hostility, pushing him toward a strategy of direct confrontation with the United States. From his return to Afghanistan in 1996 onward, bin Laden and al-Qaeda became fully committed to carrying out terrorist operations, particularly against American targets. Such actions had long been part of the organization's strategy. As early as 1990, the Federal Bureau of Investigation had searched the New Jersey residence of El Sayed Nosair, an al-Qaeda associate, uncovering documents outlining plans to destroy skyscrapers in New York City. In 1993, a truck bomb exploded outside the North Tower of the World Trade Center in Manhattan. The attack was led by Ramzi Youssef, another al-Qaeda affiliate who had received training at one of the organization's Afghan camps during the late 1980s. Earlier, in 1992, bin Laden had financed and organized the bombing of the Gold Mihor Hotel in Aden, Yemen. Al-Qaeda is also widely believed to have been involved in the Luxor massacre in November 1997, during which 62 people, most of them Western tourists, were killed by 6 Islamic militant gunmen in the Egyptian city near the Valley of the Kings. The event became known as the September 11th attacks. 4 planes were hijacked. 2 struck the World Trade Center towers. 1 hit the Pentagon. Another crashed after passengers resisted. Nearly 3,000 people died. The attacks changed global security forever. Air travel, intelligence systems, and international politics were transformed. The United States demanded the Taliban hand over Osama. When they refused, war began. American and Allied forces invaded Afghanistan in late 2001. Al-Qaeda training camps were destroyed, and the Taliban government fell. But Osama escaped. For nearly 10 years, he avoided capture. He moved between safe houses in remote regions. He communicated through trusted messengers and released recorded messages. His survival increases myth and influence among supporters. The search for Osama became the largest manhunt in modern history. Intelligence agencies tracked financial networks, communications, and contacts. Eventually, investigators located a mysterious compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. The compound had high walls, heavy security, and unusual behavior. Suspicion grew. On May 2, 2011, U.S. Special Forces launched a secret nighttime operation. Helicopters carried elite troops into the compound. After a short but intense operation, Osama bin Laden was killed. His death ended a decade-long search. Osama bin Laden's actions reshaped world history. His attacks led to wars, new security policies, and major political changes. The consequences continue to affect global relations today. His story shows how one individual's beliefs and decisions can influence millions of lives. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more.